Imagine this. A man works 16 hours a day. Every single day, his hands touch millions of dollars. He guards it, he counts it, he loads it. But when he checks his own pocket, there's nothing. Not a single extra cent to live his dreams. This was the life of David Ghantt. A poor, ordinary man. But one day, the frustration of poverty, loneliness, and broken dreams pushed him into doing something that shocked America and made the FBI launch an international manhunt. This is the unbelievable true story of the 1997 Loomis Fargo bank heist. A story so wild, so strange, and so dramatic that Hollywood made a movie about it years later. But let's go back. David Ghantt wasn't always just a security guard. He was once a soldier. He had served in the Gulf War, defending his country. When he came home, he wanted a stable life. A family. A simple job. A chance to live with dignity. But life gave him something else. David found work at Loomis Fargo, a famous armored car security company. His job? Transporting and protecting millions of dollars between banks every single day. Sounds powerful, right? But here's the cruel truth. While he guarded millions, his own salary was only $8 an hour. Sometimes, he even worked 75 to 80 hours a week, yet he could barely survive. His life was stuck in the same boring loop. Wake up. Work all day. Guard money that wasn't his. Return home tired. Repeat. Inside, David felt crushed. He was lonely. He was disappointed. He wanted something more. And then, temptation came knocking. Her name was Kelly Campbell. A bold, sharp, mysterious woman who also worked at Loomis Fargo. During their shifts, Kelly and David became friends. They talked after work, met outside, shared secrets. Even after Kelly quit her job, she still kept meeting David. Slowly, this friendship became the seed of something dangerous. One day, Kelly introduced David to her friend Steve Chambers. Steve was not just any guy. He was a small-time criminal, always dreaming of becoming rich overnight. And when Steve learned that David was a supervisor at Loomis Fargo, his mind exploded with an idea. Not just any idea. The idea of a lifetime. The idea of robbing Loomis Fargo. Now think about David for a moment. Here was a man, already frustrated, already tired of being poor. And suddenly someone tells him, "Hey, you can be rich. You can live the life you've always wanted. All you need is courage." David hesitated. At first, he was scared. He had never done anything illegal before. But Steve was persuasive. Kelly was supportive. And David was desperate. The perfect recipe for disaster. David began to imagine a different life. No more working 80 hours a week. No more empty pockets. Just luxury, happiness, and freedom. His weak resistance crumbled. And soon, David agreed to join the plan. But here's the twist. None of them were professionals. Not Steve. Not Kelly. Not David. Their plan was so simple that any experienced thief would laugh. The plan was this. On the night of October 4th, 1997, David would stay late after work. He would disable the security cameras, steal the videotapes, load the Loomis Fargo armored van with as much cash as possible, and then drive away. After the robbery, David would take $50,000 with him to Mexico, because that was the maximum legal amount someone could carry across the border without declaring it. The rest of the money would stay with Steve Chambers in the U.S. Once things cooled down, David would come back, and they would split the money. Sounds simple. But it had one huge problem. Why would Steve ever share the millions later? David never thought about it. Blinded by greed, he just followed the dream. And then, the night arrived. October 4th, 1997. David Ghantt sent his trainee staff home early. Now, he was alone, in charge of the vault. His heart was racing. His hands were shaking, but his mind was focused. Step 1. Disable the cameras. He switched off 2 of them. He even stole the tapes. But in his nervousness, he forgot one. A third hidden camera kept recording everything. And that camera would later capture history. Now came the hardest part. David began loading the money. But this wasn't normal. Usually, he moved counted amounts. This time, he had to empty the entire vault. And he had to do it alone. There were millions of dollars inside. Mostly $20 bills. Around 8,000 bundles of cash. It was heavy. It was endless. David sweated, lifted, carried, loaded, again and again. For 2 long hours, he stuffed the armored van with cash. Finally, he had it. $17.3 million. The second largest cash robbery in American history. And in his excitement, David did something foolish. He danced. Yes, right there in the vault, he danced with joy. And the hidden third camera recorded every move. The next morning, chaos exploded. When employees tried to open the vault, the keys were missing. The police were called. And guess who wasn't there? David Ghantt. Immediately, suspicion fell on him. When the FBI checked the tapes, their doubts vanished. There was David, loading the cash, and dancing like a happy thief. But that wasn't the only clue. The tape showed David constantly messaging someone on his pager. This meant he wasn't alone. There were others involved. Now, the FBI was hunting not just David, but his entire gang. 2 days later, investigators found the armored van abandoned in the woods. Inside? Around $3 million left behind. Why? Because it was too heavy, and David didn't have time. Also found the stolen camera tapes. Clear evidence. Now, David was in Mexico, enjoying life at a luxury beach resort with his $50,000. He thought he had escaped. But back home, his so-called friends were already betraying him. The FBI launched a massive campaign. They even offered a $500,000 reward for information. They asked citizens to report anyone suddenly spending too much money. And soon, a tip changed everything. A neighbor reported that Steve Chambers and his wife Michelle were suddenly living like millionaires. New house. New BMW. Lavish spending. The FBI quietly investigated. They checked bank deposits. And what did they find? Large amounts of $20 bills being deposited after October 4th. Even worse, Michelle once asked a bank teller, "How much can we deposit before the government gets suspicious?" The FBI didn't need more proof. It was clear. Steve and Michelle Chambers were involved. But the story gets darker. The FBI tapped Steve's phone. And in one call, they heard something shocking. Steve and his friend Michael McKinney were planning to kill David Ghantt in Mexico. Yes. Steve never planned to share the money. He wanted it all. The FBI acted quickly. They arrested Michael McKinney. He confessed everything. He told them David was in Mexico. He revealed how they had moved the stolen cash. The truth was out. The FBI waited for months, gathering every piece of evidence. Finally, on March 1, 1998, David Ghantt was arrested in Mexico. The next day, Steve and Michelle Chambers, along with Kelly Campbell, were arrested in North Carolina. Out of the $17.3 million stolen, around 88% was recovered. The rest had already been wasted by Steve on luxury items. The punishment? Steve Chambers, 11 years in prison. David Ghantt, 7 years in prison. And yes, David was also held responsible for the missing $3 million, even though he never spent it. Years later, in 2016, Hollywood made a comedy movie about this unbelievable heist, Masterminds. Ironically, David himself worked as a consultant on the movie, but guess what? He didn't get paid. By law, any money he earned would go directly to paying off the debt from the robbery. So even after all that, David stayed broke. Today, David lives in Jacksonville, Florida. He works as a construction worker, living a quiet life with his wife and kids. On social media, he shares his story and teaches people not to make the mistakes he made. The Loomis Fargo Heist remains one of the wildest robberies in American history. A robbery that had it all: greed, betrayal, love, stupidity, and even comedy. And it all started with one ordinary man who touched millions every day, but could never have it for himself. Backhand index pointing right, and that, my friends, is the unbelievable true story of David Ghantt and the Loomis Fargo Heist.